Welcome back. All right, so one topic of discussion that gets talked about a lot right now is the strength of the East versus the strength in the West. Now, I do definitely see a much stronger East than West. I talked about this in the power rankings this week as well, but it seems to be really gaining a lot of steam. And I think the first thing that stands out is Dallas is first in the West, right? 70 points. They're number one in the Central. They've got a 648 points percentage. That is the best in the West. That 648 would leave them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, seventh best in the East. So when I do the power rankings and Dallas fans are like, but we're first in the West, they get upset because I don't necessarily feel like they're playing the best in the West. And then there's automatically going to be at least 6 teams ahead of them in the East, in all likelihood. And when you look at this, and I want to basically contrast it in this way. If Dallas was against Boston in the playoffs, first off, I'm quite happy because that means they're in the Stanley Cup final against each other. The channel would be, it'd be tough for some people to watch that because I'd be happy no matter who won. When you look at the comparisons, Boston has a 798 points percentage to the 648 for Dallas. And of the two, I don't think that I would give Dallas much of a chance against Boston. So I thought, okay, we'll look at it this way. We'll say, okay, so in the case of East or West, if we got a Stanley Cup final where the teams that are next to each other matched up against one another, how would it turn out? Well, you'd have Dallas and Boston. I'm going to score that one for the East. I'm going to say, yeah, Boston wins that Stanley Cup final. There's no bias in that. It's Ottinger against Ullmark, which might be the one area where I think Dallas can keep up with Boston. Maybe have a little bit of an edge in a playoff series. I'm really happy with the season Ullmark's having, but it does feel like a career year. So it feels like it's gone from people overly criticizing Ullmark to maybe when I start hearing about how he's far and away the best goaltender in the league this year, I'm kind of like, he's playing very, very well, yes. But when I say he's far and away the best goalie in the league right now, no, I would say there are a couple others in the East who can definitely hold their own against him. So then we get to the second level here. You've got the number one team in the Pacific. That's Vegas. 68 points, 630 points percentage against Carolina. 76 points, 731 points percentage. So the difference here is a .101 in the points percentage department, which is huge. Absolutely huge in terms of a difference. And I don't see Vegas with the injuries they have currently. And if you're comparing, and again, goaltending can be number one comparison in a lot of cases because people do look at playoffs starting with goaltending. There might be a little bit of a soft now just because Freddie Anderson having a couple of shaky games here and there. But yeah, I still don't see how Carolina doesn't beat Vegas. And again, this is right now in a best of seven series. So right away, the East is up 2-0, right? So then you got Winnipeg against New Jersey. Fascinating matchup. Winnipeg, 67 points. They have a 632 points percentage. New Jersey, 73 points, a 702 points percentage. In a 7-game series, I kind of like Winnipeg's experience. I kind of prefer Hellebuck over Vanacek. I think it's closer than Vanacek might get credit for. But in that matchup, I do like Winnipeg against New Jersey. I think New Jersey in the playoffs are going to be a lot of fun to watch, but they're young, they're still learning. This might be a year where we see New Jersey take a step back in said playoffs once they get there, and then next year they become that really good contender, right? So we'll see. Then you got Seattle and Toronto. Now, 65 points for Seattle. They have a 613 points percentage. Toronto, 72 points, a 667 points percentage. We look at goaltending. I do give the edge to Samsonov and the Leafs. I think that for the Leafs, yes, I know, first round upset. They're out in the first round. It is sad that Toronto, 72 points, 667 points percentage, would be number one in the West. They are entrenched as fourth in the East, although you'll notice the points percentage, Tampa Bay has the better points percentage, but they're still 2 points back. But I think in a matchup between Seattle and Toronto, I like Toronto's odds there. I do. I think that Toronto wins that matchup. And I know, it's just crazy, isn't it? Because that means Seattle and Toronto in the Stanley Cup final. I would enjoy that final. I think the world might implode if that was actually to take place. So the Oilers and Tampa Bay. I could try to make an argument for the Oilers knocking off Tampa Bay in the playoffs. I can make the argument for McDavid's magic. I can make the argument for Draisaitl and all of that. But Tampa Bay is just so strong. Their blue line's fantastic. And Vasilevsky against Skinner. So this is where things have gotten kind of ugly, isn't it? It's already 4-1 in favor of the East. And when I was putting this together, I did not predetermine this. I didn't go through and figure out all the math and then start the video. I always do this sort of as an improv. But I thought, yeah, the East would probably decimate the West in straightforward matchups of East versus West. I don't think this would go well. The LA Kings, 65 points, 602 points percentage, the same points percentage as the Oilers. The Rangers, 70 points, 660 points percentage. Shesterkin versus Quick. Be a great matchup. And I have to say, if this became a Stanley Cup final, the LA Kings and the Rangers, well, we've seen that before. But I wouldn't mind seeing it again with new guys this time around. That being said, again, I don't see how the Rangers lose that series. The addition of Tarasenko, the fact that they already have a really good blue line led by Adam Fox. And not to take anything away from the Kings, they're playing quite well. The Kings could still end up being first in the Pacific. They're only 3 points back. But would the LA Kings beat the Rangers in a 7-game series starting today? Igor says no. That's where I find it. And then there's the fact that you have Panarin, you have Fox, you have Zibanejad. You have so many weapons. The Kings are good, yes, but I think the Rangers are legit contenders and would win that series. Now, Colorado against Washington. So Colorado, 60 points, 588 points percentage. This is the first matchup where the team in the West has a better points percentage than the team in the East, which is Washington, 62 points, 564 points percentage. Washington has had their struggles on and off. So they beat Boston, and then they lose at home against San Jose, which is, yeah, that kind of indicates how the season's gone for Washington. In that matchup, I like Colorado. I can't see Colorado losing in a 7-game series against the Caps. Caps are having troubles with scoring right now. Colorado's defense and goaltending are underrated, in my opinion, and it's Colorado. So I think Colorado wins that matchup. Now, the final seed above the playoff line that we're going to talk about, and we will talk about a couple below the playoff line because I feel like you have to, because we're getting into the overall depth of each conference. And I think it's great that I can have 20 teams on the board that legitimately could be in the playoffs, and that there's a team I'm leaving off in the East in Buffalo that could legitimately be in the playoffs as well. It is far more entertaining to have so many teams in the race than it is when everything's already set in stone, as it was last year in the East, right? So you got Minnesota and Pittsburgh. This is a fascinating matchup. When Minnesota, 577 points percentage with 60 points. Pittsburgh, 587 with a 61 points. This is a tough one. You got Kaprizov on one side, Crosby on the other. You've got Marc-Andre Fleury as the starting goaltender in a playoff series in all likelihood for Minnesota against Tristan Jarry, should he be healthy for that series. And that's a big question mark. But Minnesota's had their troubles recently. So has Pittsburgh. Not an easy series, but I'm going to give the edge to the Penguins. I'm going to give the edge to the Penguins. So of the teams above the playoff line, there are 2 in the West that I think would beat the team in that same spot in the East as they are. I would go with Winnipeg. I would go with Colorado. And outside of that, it's probably kind of a bloodbath. You guys can let me know in the comment section below which teams you think would actually win these series, because it's not going to happen unless we end up with these teams meeting in a Stanley Cup final. It's just not going to happen. It's fun to talk about, though. So then below the playoff line, because I think, with Calgary tied with Minnesota, it's worthy of discussion. The Islanders only 1 point back. Again, it's worthy of discussion. So if you had Calgary against the Islanders, it is tough to go against Sorokin, isn't it? It is tough to go against that suffocating defense that the New York Islanders can play. Horvat's goal scoring, he can be a performer in the playoffs. We saw that in Vancouver in 2020. Calgary, of course, you've got Markstrom, another former Canuck. You've got a pretty good team in Calgary, a team that has had its struggles on and off coming from the goaltending. Who would be the starter right now? Would it be Vladar? Would it be a Markstrom? How long of a leash would Markstrom have if he's the starter? Oh, this is a tough one. And again, this is why I wanted to include the below the playoff line, because I think it gets a little bit tougher to call once you get to the lower seeds than maybe the higher seeds, at least on some level. I kind of want to say Calgary, but I looking at the recent playoff history, I'm going to give that one to the Islanders, but it's begrudgingly. And then you got Nashville and Florida. So Nashville, 56 points. These guys were in the same division, of course, not that long ago. The 56-game season we probably won't talk about again. 560 points percentage for Nashville on the Florida side, 58 points, 527 points percentage. In a 7-game series right now between Florida and Nashville, I like Nashville. I like Nashville because they got Saros. They've also got Lankinen. And I think Nashville has been able to, over the last few weeks, put together more consistent efforts and better 60-minute games. And when they can't, their goaltending bails them out a little bit better than for Florida. But that series would be close too. So of the 10 on the board, 7 of the series, I believe, would go to the East. 3 of the series would go to the West. So, yes, by that count and by my estimation, the East is much stronger than the West. And it does mean that we'll see teams get knocked out in the first round in the East who likely would have made it through the first round in the West. This is nothing new, though. There's always been an imbalance in the NHL on some level, whether it's between divisions, whether it's between conferences. And the only way to fix that would be 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, and all of that. But the only way to do that is a completely balanced schedule, which the NHL did in the early 80s. It was so successful, they retired it after 2 seasons. Travel costs, just the matchups were just a nightmare. And so, yeah, it's one of those ultimate dreams for people who want to see the actual best teams play against one another in later rounds would be 1 versus 16. 1 versus 8 sounds great, but 1 versus 16, I'd be all for that, if not for travel, if not for, the fact you'd have to have every team play against each other. Well, let's see. We have 31 other teams, so if you played every other team 3 times, you're still at... It becomes ridiculous. So it gets very, very difficult in a 32-team league to have a truly balanced schedule, to have the East and the West able to intermingle in the first round and make it work. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I just thought this was a fun thing to look at. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.